Hi guys, and welcome back to another Apex Racing Academy setup tutorial. It's Alex Simpson in the Indy Pro 2000, and we're going to talk about tyre pressures, how to set them up, how to tweak the cambers, and we're going to talk a little bit about aerodynamics of this car. So tyre pressures, cambers, the most important thing with any car when it comes to building a setup. Now, as an Apex Racing Academy subscriber, coaches will have done a lot of the hard work for you, but I just kind of wanted to go into a little bit of detail about how we set them up, just in case you ever need to build a setup yourself. You've got that knowledge that you can take away and yeah, sort of fend for yourself, so to speak. Um, at the moment, I will put a little caveat in there, is that iRacing, obviously, they don't always have, perfect physics and things like that. It may be that, like now, the optimal tire pressure is below where we can actually get. So we're kind of restricted. So it may be the coaches have set these at the minimum pressures for a reason that we actually want to be a little bit lower. In a future season, is 2020 season 3 at the moment, it might be that it's the highest pressures, so we might have max pressures that we're starting with and giving you from the data packs. But typically, like I say, the coaches are going to get you in the optimal range. Now, how we find the optimal range is we will basically go out, do some laps on the circuit, maybe a 10 lap run or so, and we'll come back and we'll look at this tread remaining figure. If this tread remaining figure is perhaps a little bit all over the shot, then we kind of have a bit of a nose and see what's going on. If the middle of the tyre is wearing out a lot more than perhaps the outside and the inside edges, it's usually an indication to us that the pressures are too high and that they're ballooning out, and it's only the middle of the tyre that is making contact with the road, and in this case we will bring the tyre pressures down. That's the same front and back and left and right. If the opposite is true. If we haven't got enough pressure, then what we actually see is the inside and outside edge wear a lot more over, say, a 10 lap run. And that will give us the clue that we need to go up on the pressure so that the tyre can basically handle the load that it's being through, and it's not ballooning out at the side. The air's not ballooning out the side of the tyres and causing the contact patches to move to the outside edges. Um, we'll then basically do some tweaks in the car, go out, do another little run. We will hopefully see straight away in the lap times as well an increase in speed, as well as sort of lap times, and benefit um, instantly on the circuit there as well. And what we'll do is we'll kind of rinse and repeat that process until we feel like we're in a really good place. We are not going any faster on the track, but also our wear rates here seem to be in a fairly even place. So we want the inside and the middle of the tyre to be close to each other. Not going to be exact, but they're going to be pretty close, and this outside edge is going to be a bit lower. We On road racing, we pay most of our attention on the inside and middle of their tyre in terms of the wear rates. And I'll explain a little bit more when we get into the cambers about why we want to do that when we start talking about cambers. Now, once we're in that kind of zone where we feel like the pressures are good, it may be that we just do some micro adjustments based on the circuit that we are at. Circuits that are very slow with a lots of acceleration zones in, so your Okiyamas, your Interlagos, for example, it might be that we actually need a little bit more support in those slow speed big areas, and it might be that we'll come down on the pressure ever so slightly, and what it will do is that will basically try and prevent the wheel spin in those areas, and of course it's the wheel spin that's heating the tyre up and wearing the tyre out. So if we are noticing massive issues in sort of slow speed sections, then we'll perhaps go a little bit lower in our sort of operating range that we have found. Whereas the opposite is true on some of the high speed circuits. If we find that the car is a bit unstable through high speed corners or mid speed corners, then it may be that we need to go up a little bit on the pressure just to counteract the fact that the tyre is almost falling over on itself through those high-speed corners. And yes, we just give it a little bit more support and stability with a bit of added pressure there. So that's how we will make marginal changes to sort of improve a setup. Now, of course, for yourself, while we've set this in the range, it's kind of built by the coach. So what you should do is on every circuit is you definitely should make some fine-tune adjustments yourself. If you are more comfortable in slow speed corners, it might be that the pressures are perhaps set already too low for yourself, and actually you're not very good through high speed and you want a bit more support through the high speed corners. So if the car's more twitchy and things like that coming off of these high speed corners, then maybe just go a click or two up on the pressures, give yourself that added support. If the opposite is true, if you struggle in slow speed and putting the power down, then maybe you would benefit from going for a click down on the rear pressures just to give you that extra support. I like to sort of give the explanation, think of like a dragster in terms of how they put the power down. Massive, great big tyres, super low pressures, and you see it on the super slow mos how the tyre basically ripples in and just sort of grips into the circuit. And that's effectively what we're doing by lowering the pressures. We're nowhere near as low as what they are, just because, you know, we have to deal with corners and they're on a straight line, and I don't need to worry about that. The fronts of the tyres also have a bit of an effect in terms of braking and pressures as well. A lower pressure tyre in a big long braking zone will be more efficient than a really high pressured tyre as well. So if you're struggling with lockups, as well as like brake bias adjustments, you can maybe tweak this down ever so slightly. You'll also notice that with a lower pressure tyre, the car will initially turn in just slightly better as well. But again, that's more for sort of like slow speed corners. On high speed corners, um, the you might find that the car washes out straight away, and that's because the pressure's not high enough to be able to support the load that's going through it. So you kind of have to balance. So circuits like Spa are very tricky because they do have a couple of really sort of key slow speed areas, but also some really high speed corners, and you have to adjust accordingly. So it can be a bit of a compromise. So you might have to sacrifice different areas of the course. Um, just to sort of get a good average over the whole circuit. Once we feel like we're in a good place with that, this is where we'll start to look at cambers. And at the moment, Peter has got a 4.9 negative on the front, 3.9 on the back. And what that effectively means is that the tyre is at an angle like this. It's not that severe, but what we're doing is we set the car up to lean on the inside edge of the tyre, and more the middle, than the outside edge. Now the reason we don't want to run the car on the outside edge, when we go through a high spot, or we go through any corner, the opposite side of the car gets loaded up, so all of the basically the grip is on that side of the car. So if we're talking about pull-on, where we're going around that fast left-hander, all of the load is on this right-hand side of the car. So most of the grip comes from here and from here, with a little bit obviously here, but nowhere near as much. Yeah, so what happens is your wheel starts off at this camber angle going into the corner, and then as the car rolls into the corner and all the load goes through it, the car rolls over onto itself, ever so slightly, and you see these sometimes on the super slow-mo view shots, that suddenly this car rolls over so much that the wheel starts to straighten up in angle. So instead of it being pointing in this direction, it's almost standing up vertically, and that is where we get this larger contact patch. So what we were trying to get is this figure. We basically want this tyre to be touching the ground as much as possible when it's fully loaded up. So typically what we would do is we would use some telemetry software like VRS and check that the tyre temperatures are even across the tyre through our perhaps highest speed corner. And this means that we've got basically maximum grip going through that corner. Um, that we can possibly get. Now, of course, every corner is different. Every corner has different speeds and different loads and things like that, and that is why we're never going to be able to get the camber in a perfect position for every single corner of every single racetrack. We just have to get the best average. And the way we work that out is we use this tread remaining again to have an optimized setup on the car. What we try and look at is getting the inside tread and the middle tread wear rate exactly the same. So if we do a 10 lap run and we come off and these are both on say 85%, then as an average we have our cambers absolutely in the best place. Some places it might not be leaning over enough, but in other places it might be leaning over more um, than perhaps what we want. But as an average, we're getting the best possible grip over the whole course. What we don't want is we don't want to be loading up the outside of the tyre. If this is also an average, what it means is there's positions on the circuit where instead of the tyre being like this or like this, actually it's more like this. And so we're wearing out this outside edge, and that is absolutely not what we want because the tyre can't dig into the ground like this. If this is the tyre that's loaded up, it's digging into the ground, it's using G-force to dig and produce the grip. But if it's coming in at this angle instead, because it's completely rolled over on itself, or perhaps we're talking just a few degrees, um, what that means it's going to do is actually going to skid across the circuit instead. So the slip angle is going to be come into massive effect to us, and we're going to have way less grip than what we would have done if we had been focused on getting it absolutely perfect for these two areas of the tire. So that's why in road racing we focus on the inside and middle wear rates being as close to identical on each specific tire for every circuit, and that's how we will basically go and set up our camber levels for a long run. Now, I will say, so yeah, sorry, I just need to add, so yeah, so if you are wearing this inside edge too much, then you need to take camber levels off so that it can even up to the middle of the tire. If you're wearing out still the middle more than the inside edge, then you need more camber. You might find that you're in a position where you can't add any more camber. And again, that can be down to iRacing and what they allow us to actually set the car as. And in this case, we just kind of, you'll see there'll be some setups this season that the coaches are going to give you that will be on max cambers, and that is kind of why. So yeah, don't worry about them being set there. They're just kind of, they want more, but they can't get it. Um, if we can get these wear rates to be identical, that is going to give us the best car in the race on the long run. So come the end of the race, we're going to be as quick as we can possibly be. We're going to hold on to our tyres longer than everybody else, and that's kind of where you will either make gains or pull away from your rivals and things like that. It might You might look at the lap times with a really aggressive camber angle initially straight out of the pits and think, well, I'm quicker, I'm a 2/10 quicker. I can assure you that that may be right, but come the end of the race, this figure here is going to be way lower than the middle wear rate, and your rivals who had this aggressive camber, they are going to be really suffering at the end of the race and are going to be having much slower lap times than what you are. You've kind of just got to, yeah, you're just balancing it for the whole race. Of course, if you're doing a short little 15-20 minute race and you're not worried about these figures because you're only going down to about 90%, then of course you can abuse the camber a little bit more. So that's obviously one exception to the rule. Right, that's pretty much how we set the tyres and the cambers and pressures up. Let's take a quick look at the aerodynamics. Pretty simple on this Indy car, the Indy Pro car. There's just two things that we've got to work with. So the front flap angle and the rear flap angle. And literally what they do is A1 is your lowest setting, C6 is your highest setting. So C6 will give you much more front downforce. So that will make the car turn a lot more in sort of like your medium and high speed corners. Has less of effect in slow speed, more of effect in high speed. The rear is the same. So A1 is your lowest setting, so this will give you hardly any rear downforce against your highest setting, which is all the way up at E5 on this car. So yeah, so that will give you maximum downforce on the rear. So the more you put on the rear of the car, the more understeer you'll get. The more you take off, um, the more oversteer you will get based on your setting. Now, of course, why would we necessarily want to have um, a really high downforce on the rear and on the front? Well, it might be that it's a circuit that you can't get a great deal of straight line speed out of. So circuits, again, like your Okiyamas come to mind, and just try to think of another short circuit that kind of comes in. I want to say like Summit Point is a short one, not very long straights, and rare that we're gonna go there. Um, Sakuba is another one. So where the straights are, like I say, Lime Rock Park. Where you're not going to get up to much top speed, you're constantly going to be accelerating. We'll load the downforce onto the car there so that we're even quicker through the corners. No point in having a car that's super fast in a straight line if we can't use it. Circuits like Watkins and Spa, um, Le Mans, we're obviously going to go for really low downforce. So the coaches will typically have got you in the right range. This is the Watkins Glen setup that we're looking at, and as you can see, Peter has gone for a fairly low downforce setup on the front and rear of the car. And that's what we'd expect at a kind of high-speed circuit. What we've got here as well, so Peter's balanced his car out so that it obviously feels nice with the turn in, so it's not too oversteery, it's not too understeery in key sort of high aero places. And he's not necessarily used the aero balance here, but this is kind of the percentage that we've got in terms of our downforce levels. This calculator tells us how much or where the aero balance is. At the moment it's 43.7% to the front of the car. So that means we've got a slight bit, our downforce is set up to give us understeer overall. Of course, the suspension can make a difference to the general feel of the car, but you'll typically always see this in an understeery position. If, for example, you decide, you know what, I think like I want a little bit more downforce at this circuit. I think this is just not good enough. I keep drifting off the course on the exit of corners and things like that. Well, in this case, you can add a little bit more downforce, and you can use this calculator to keep the balance in check. So 43.7 is what we've got here. Let's go up 2 clicks on the front wing. I'll apply that, and it's changed the front area percentage now to 45.3%. So we've got a car that will turn much more in sort of aero heavy places. Yes, it's going to give you more downforce overall, but of course the car is going to be more twitchy, and you might not actually gain any time. You might drive it and go, oh no, that's almost impossible to drive now, it's too twitchy. Well, what you should do is you've got to go up on the rear at the same time. So we went up 2 clicks, so let's do 2 clicks on the rear, and you see it's only gone back down to 44.7, so we're still not at the same balance that we had before. I'll go up another one, 44.3, still not there, so we're into the B's, and that's 44.0, so we're still off. You can see how you need to do so much more on on the rear of the car to get an equal balance on the front of overall with the rear. So here we are now. We went up a total of what, 5, 6 clicks to keep the same balance that we had before. So that's how you would go about using the aero balance calculator to make sure that you can adjust aerodynamic levels, but keep the same balance that the coaches give you. Um, if, for example, you wanted just a fraction more downforce, but not so much. So let's let's reset the setup that Peter's provided to us. So he's got this 43.7%. Let's say you wanted just a fraction more. So that's gone up to 44.5. What we could do is go, well, actually, there we go. That's if I do one more, that's probably going to be so that's going to be slightly less than what we want. But this 43.9 gives us slightly more. So there we go. We have just a fraction more on the front end balance. So the car will turn in just a little bit more now, not much, but just a fraction, and that might be a slightly better overall balance than what you were perhaps looking for. So that's how you can make very minor changes and know that you're yeah, the car's not suddenly just going to get wrecked. A lot of people, yeah, will think that one click on the front is the same as having one click on the back. It's absolutely not. You have to use this calculator here to kind of work out what it is that you're doing with the aerodynamics. Of course, if you want understeer, then you would add, like I was saying earlier, so that's now got a bit less turning in, so you'd go more up on the rear, and again you can balance it as you want. If you only need just a fraction, then you would have I think we say this one was the 43.6, so yes, so instead of 43.7 it's now 43.6, so just a little bit lower. Right, I hope that gives you a good explanation on how to set up the tyres, the pressures, the cambers, and a little bit about the aerodynamics in this Indy Pro 2000. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for subscribing. If you have any questions, do ask them on Discord. I'll try and help you as best I can, but for now, see you again.